Emigration, not immigration, hits a 10-year high of people moving to the United States as Canada just completely implodes, essentially, and people are seeing the writing on the wall and they're leaving. So let's read this article. Emigration from Canada to the US hits a 10-year high as tens of thousands head south. Tens of thousands of Canadians are emigrating from Canada to the United States, and the number of people packing up and moving south has hit a level not seen in 10 years or more, according to data compiled by CBC News. There is nothing new about Canadians moving south of the 49th parallel for love, work, or warmer weather, but the latest figures from the American Community Survey suggest it's now happening at a much higher rate than the historical average. The ACS, which is conducted by the US Census Bureau, says that the number of people moving from Canada to the US hit 126,340 in 2022. That's an increase of nearly 70% over the 75,752 who made the move in 2012, 10 years earlier. And remember, we're talking about 2022 data. That data is pretty old now. We're in 2024. So is it that the trend got worse after that, do you think? Or do you think it got better? I can tell you it's probably got a lot worse than that. So of the 126,340 who emigrated from Canada to the US that year, 53,311 were born in Canada, 42,595 were Americans who left here for their native land, and 30,434 were foreign-born immigrants to Canada who decided to move to the US instead. And you can basically see the pace of this, and it is just crazy when you look at this chart. Obviously, 2022 is showing massive growth in all categories when you look at the amount of people that are moving. And then the top countries where Canadians have emigrated 2020, United States, United Kingdom was number 2, which actually really surprised me. Australia and New Zealand, France, Italy, and then other countries, 269,000. So it's very, very interesting. And then they talk about this Facebook group where lots of Canadians moving to Florida, more than 55,000. And then they talk about what people are saying. I hate the politics here. Terminesi said the phone had been ringing off the hook for the last 18 months with calls from Canadians wanting to move to sunny Florida. With Trudeau, I have to get out of here. That's what people tell me. They say to me, Marco, who do I have to talk to get out of here? There's a lot of hatred, a lot of pissed off calls. It was really shocking for me to hear all of this. And I'm not sure all of these people who are moving for the right reason. People are saying, I hate the politics here. I'm uprooting my whole family and moving down. And I say, well, that problem can be solved in a year or two. And I don't actually agree with that, because basically it's not just a problem with Trudeau's politics. It's a problem with the status quo in general. I mean, unfortunately, if you're voting for the Conservatives or the Liberals, it really doesn't matter. They're both status quo political parties who are going to deliver very little to no change, but are going to virtue signal towards their voting group that they're doing all the things that they like to do. I mean, a prime example of this is what we've seen happen with Danielle Smith, who's widely seen as one of the most libertarian politicians in Canada, but actually she's been much like all the other politicians in her virtue signaling, not really doing anything. It's very, very interesting when you really think about it that he's saying, oh, well, it might be solved in a year or two. Again, I don't think it's that. I think a lot of people are figuring out that even if the power changes over to the Conservatives, not much is going to happen. And, you know, interestingly enough, I'll just tell you real quickly, like my home country, the UK, has gone through this back and forth between Liberals and Conservatives and lost decades and slow economic growth, wage suppression, high immigration, all the things that Canada is going through right now, but it's been happening in the UK for way longer than it has in Canada. And basically only now you are beginning to see another party that is rising up out of nowhere because people are so sick of the status quo. Now it's obvious that Labour is going to win the next election, but what about after that? that. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And hopefully, I'm hopeful that politics will change and you will see new parties rise up out of nowhere, because that's what we need to happen. We need to have parties that challenge the established power structures and the status quo and aren't just populist virtue signaling clowns that are going to actually just do nothing but tell us that they're doing everything that we think would be good and makes us feel good. So anyway, it's very interesting. So while the US, like Canada, has grappled with inflation, the cost of living can be cheaper in some states. Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly not in Florida, though. And interestingly enough, it's really more to do with the wages. I mean, if you have visited the United States over the past couple of years as a Canadian, you will know that it's way more expensive. I mean, I've been to about 10 states over the past couple of years, and they've all just been mind-blowingly expensive. But we always put it in the perspective of our dollar and the amount of money that we earn here in Canada. But obviously, if you are earning a higher amount in the United States, then the burden of that high cost of living might not seem so bad to you. And that's the key distinction that you have to make. So it's not necessarily a lower cost of living, it's just higher wages compared to the cost of living, especially when it comes to the higher skilled jobs. And it's the complete opposite when it comes to the lower skilled jobs. But I'm willing to bet that most of these people moving down have businesses, have really high skilled jobs. The average US home price is lower than it is here in Canada, $580,700 in the US compared to $703,000 in Canada. That's 20% lower after adjusting for exchange rates. The price gap is even more stark in some states. But you've also got a lot of states that are even more than that. So, you know, I don't know, the balance is kind of off. There's a reason why so many people are making the move. It's a call for Canada to wake up and try and keep its residents. And I would totally agree with that statement there. I've never known so many people who are making the move to Florida or who have already moved. I definitely think we're sadly going in the wrong direction. Crime rates, carjacking, the healthcare system has been declining rapidly year over year. Canada is just not what it's used to be. I mean, I would say that about the United States as well. It's in decline as well. It's just got a much higher standard of living, and a standard of living that is actually increasing depending on what sort of job and what sort of industry you're in. The healthcare system has major problems. It's one of the worst healthcare systems in the world. It's just completely different problems to a public healthcare system, which is also something I would highlight. Saunders qualified for an E2 treaty visa because his wife owns a business selling water valves. So interesting. The tax burden is less onerous in many states. There's no state income tax in Florida yet, but once you're in bed with the United States in terms of tax relationship, that's going to follow you around for the rest of your life. If you ever decide to leave the United States, if you ever try and bank or have brokerage accounts in other countries, people just will not want to deal with you because you've been in bed with the United States because of the amount of red tape and regulation. And obviously the tax system in the United States is very unique to the United States. So yes, you can earn more money, pay less taxes in certain states, but again, that is with a massive trade-off of being involved with the United States in terms of that tax relationship. However, if you're a US citizen anyway, it really doesn't make any difference. Canadian households just entered a lost decade of economic growth. Canada's economy is growing at a much slower than anticipated pace. Real GDP reported annualized growth of 1.7% in Q1 2024, smaller than analysts had anticipated. That was due in part to a downward revision of Q4 2023 to 0.1% for the quarter, a tenth of what had been originally reported. So, I mean, you're just seeing these downward revisions. It's very, very interesting what is going on there. You have to ask the question, are these figures trustworthy at all? And the answer to that question, obviously, we know on this channel, is no. No, they are not. Canada's per capita recession has extended nearly 2 years, and that's what matters. The growth rate is still positive, but nowhere near where it should be for the rate of Canada's population. When measured against the still rapidly growing population, per capita GDP has declined for the 6th quarter out of the last 7, said chief economist at RBC. And then you can basically see this on a chart from RBC Economics Research. Canada's drop in per capita real GDP only occurred over a few quarters, but occurred so fast it wiped out an unimaginable amount of progress. The most recent quarter of per capita real GDP is roughly the same level level it was a decade ago. Canadians just experienced a lost decade, with all progress made in the first 8 years wiped out within the past 2. Just crazy. And then Stephen, I think, sums it up excellently here. The sharp slowdown was largely expected after going all in on credit-driven growth, such as residential investment, i.e. buying houses, and government-driven stimulus. It won't be a short period either, with experts warning it will last for decades. The slowdown currently happening is also whilst the economy is viewed as healthy. So buckle up. Things can get a little messy in the short term, and don't we know it? I mean, just look at all those dodgy mortgages and all the other things that are going on in Canada. And here's just another story about a Colombian family who go back to Colombia and they're like, what on earth am I doing in Canada? People are happier in Colombia, things are less expensive, and they just realize how much the standard of living is in decline in Canada, and the cost of living has just absolutely exploded and is impacting people to the extent that they're moving to Colombia, Nicaragua, Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico, Dominican Republic, United States, all these different places. So it's just crazy, and this really tells the story of what's going on. You gotta kind of have a heart and feel sorry for these people who are duped into coming to this country. So listen to this.
Depression is the worst thing that I get through from the last 2 months when I went to Canada.
Life in Canada isn't what Anit Kaur envisioned when she came here from India. Finding an affordable place to live was the first big challenge.
I was facing so much issues because if I'm asking from any landlord for my one-room basement, they are charging so much high from the international students because they know that
she's just asking for a one-room basement, let's remember.
We don't have any much knowledge.
Short of options, she found a spot in a 2-bedroom basement suite. In total, 6 students live there. She shares her room with 2 of them.
The room size is too small. How can easily 3 people can live there? Even there is no storage capacity there, so how can I put my storage and stuff there?
She feels there's little privacy or security.
Due to this reason, I just always carry my important documents to my university, also even on my job.
Kaur didn't want to take us to her home out of fear of eviction, but
I mean, this is just sick, guys. This is just absolutely sick, and it's infuriating for me as well to see this sort of situation going on with these slumlords that are taking advantage of it. Many of them who know how to game the system and especially take advantage of a lot of the people that are coming from China and coming from India. It is sick what is going on and what people are being put through, which is essentially depression living standards in Canada. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I would highly recommend that you watch this video here. Anyway, if you're looking for a VPN to get around all the censorship laws, yes, believe it or not, we have that in Canada. Go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. That's the VPN that I use. I will see you in the next one. Take care.